Good evening. We'll call the meeting to order if that's possible. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is the Lents Neighborhood Livability Association, our honors meeting. Saturday, we have a few announcements. You can read them on here if you wish. But neighbor to neighbor, this Saturday from 8:15 to noon, right here at the church. We meet for breakfast and then at 9 o'clock disperse out to our care receivers. They're always looking for new volunteers. Then the LNLA also does weekly cleanups at West Rock. On neighbor-to-neighbor Saturdays, it's kind of floating depending on weather. But this summer we've been doing the West Rock cleanups right after neighbor-to-neighbor. So we have Sunday free. And each week we go and pick up the trash around West Rock, and that they make a donation to us, and that's where we get our operating funds, some donations from West Rock. And August 20th is our Leeway Block Party, which is an informative protest, if you want to call it that, or at least a block party to let the neighbors know that the city intends to place sanctioned unsafe rest village, and I say unsafe on purpose. Unsafe rest village at 106th and Greenway on what should be protected land. And Saturday, August 27th, it's a concert for us. So we should take care of So we'll go ahead and get started with our first guest speaker, Sergeant Matt Ferguson with Multnomah County Sheriff's Office.
Thanks.
You can take it away and
all right, I'll see if I can navigate this computer. Like you said, my name is Matt Ferguson. I'm with Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. Believe it or not, I am a real police officer. That's how I get to dress for work, so I have a pretty good gig. I work for a unit that does predominantly drug investigations, but that has shifted over the last few years, and we're really more of a gun investigating team just because of the gun violence we're seeing right now. Drugs are a huge piece of it. I would say almost everything that we do criminally in this county and in the city are related to drug use, and distribution. And I'll kind of share some of that. I don't recognize anybody in here. That's a good thing. So jump in on a bunch of slides. I updated this PowerPoint and put some stuff in there. Some of it's kind of relevant. It's a little bit older, but just interrupt as you go. I'm going to blow through some of this because it's not really pertinent, but to what you guys want to know. But if you have questions as we're going, ask questions and we'll fire away. We'll get going. Just a little bit about me. All this is true. I used to run from the police, and then I learned that if you just stop and talk to them, you'll probably just get a ticket. I graduated from high school and attended Colorado State University. Got a degree in sociology, which you really can't do anything with other than become a police officer. I can't cut or measure very well, so I don't have any other skills outside of this. I worked as a juvenile counselor. I've been a probation officer for about 5 years in Multnomah County, and then I went over to the sheriff's office, and I've been in investigations for the past 15 years or so, and then I went to patrol as a supervisor. I've been in Multnomah County for 23 years, and I've seen some pretty significant changes in this community, and judging by some of you, I think you've maybe been here maybe at least 23 years. It's nice to see some folks over there that are in line. Makes me feel good. So I'm disappointed with where our community's gone and some of the things that have happened. I feel really bad actually for the Lents community in particular because I think you guys have been hit almost the hardest. And I know, and Violet and I have spoken about this before. I work with Violet, so I know her. The resources don't make it out to the east side of the county very often. They either stay downtown or they go to the Southwest Hills, and nothing else gets out here. So people kind of struggle out here. So I feel your pain. I've seen it myself, and it's frustrating. Let's keep going. Come on. Might be locked up. Some technical difficulties. All right. My team is called the Special Investigations Unit, and we specifically look at doing drug investigations, human trafficking, and as I said, gun crimes. We also do our own investigations that result in doing search warrants and arrest warrants. We also have a member of our team that is a member of the U.S. Marshals, and so we work on the fugitive task force as well. So we go out and locate fugitives who are doing violent crime in the community, and it's kind of our day-to-day. I never know what my day is going to be like, but there's 4 of us, including myself, and we have an investigation technician, and we have a drug dog, and he's not here today. I know everybody's like, "Boo, where's your dog?" I'm just going to talk about some of the things that we're seeing as far as drug trafficking in Portland. Heroin, so Portland is a destination. I also work for a thing called HIDA, which is High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. Portland is a destination location for drugs out of Mexico, and all of the drugs that we consume in Oregon come from all the illicit drugs, heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, and fentanyl. Those all come from Mexico. They're produced in bulk in Mexico, and they're smuggled up here through various trade routes. Decide which one you want. The cool thing about it is the United States of America is #1 in drug consumption. We consume 90% of all opioids that are produced in the world. So, go America. Portland is #1 in overdoses, so we're also awesome, and we are in a bad trend right now. So these are the things we're trying to combat. Heroin, we are not seeing anymore at the moment. It's hard to make, it's expensive, it's hard to ship. So when you make heroin, you have to harvest opium poppies, you get opium from that, you have to break it down, you add chemicals, they do it in labs out in the jungle down in Central America, and they make heroin out of it. And heroin, if you've ever used it, seen it, or been around it, it stinks. It smells like vinegar, it's really sticky, it's messy, and it's really hard to smuggle, and dogs can find it really easy. So when we find heroin being smuggled, it's wrapped in packaging. They'll take heroin, they'll wrap it in packaging, and they will cover it with axle grease, and they'll wrap it again, they'll cover it with like drywall plaster, and they'll cover it again, put more axle grease in it, and they think that's going to mask the odor. The dog still finds it. So that's how we would traditionally find heroin. If you can imagine a golf ball, that's what size it is. That's an ounce, and that ounce of heroin is about $1,200. You break that down into individual grams, which is going to be about the size of my pinky, for over $100. And that's what a user would buy. And then they take that gram and break it down day by day, and they use that. A gram user, that's a lot of heroin. And we're just not really seeing that, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. But that's what it would look like, kind of a golf ball. It's wrapped really tight like that, and that's just being sold. You just meet, and I already told you about how this works. Sold in parking lots, car-to-car deals, hotel deals. The more you buy, the better you bang. It's like going to Costco. So if you're going to buy like individual grams of heroin, or you're going to buy just an ounce, it's going to cost you a lot. The drug industry is particularly racist. If you're a white guy, you're going to pay higher prices. I don't know why. It just is the way it goes. So we see all that. That was what we commonly see with heroin. We have only one kind of heroin in the Pacific Northwest, in that brown tar heroin. It's either brown or heroin's in there. So heroin is, like I said, we have black tar heroin, and sometimes we'll call it gunpowder. It looks just like what do I call it? Brown sugar, and you just melt that down, and it melts really easy. You'll hear people refer to those things as China white, and China white comes from Afghanistan traditionally. It's a white heroin. We really don't see that here. I've seen it twice in my career. It's not really a thing out here. It's hard to get here. It'd have to come all the way from the East Coast. It's kind of a kitschy thing, or if someone's a very, I guess, advanced heroin user, that's what they get. Again, all of it comes from Mexico. These are, this is what heroin balloons would look like. This is what we used to find, little balloons. They're about that big around. Guys would carry them in their mouth and they'd spit them out and just hand them to you on the street, and you'd hand them their money. And then if the police contacted you, you would just drink. They always carry a water bottle, and you drink the entire water bottle, and you swallow all of the balloons, and the evidence is gone. So then we would take them to the hospital, because if those balloons rupture, you're going to die. So I'll spare you the details of how they get it out. It's a big jug of laxative, let's just say that. Heroin, this is the other thing about heroin that makes it difficult, is you need a way to ingest it. You have to smoke it, you have to inject it. It's kind of messy. You have to have a kit, and you have to carry that around, and once upon a time that stuff used to be illegal. And again, I already talked about black tar heroin, so I'll move through that. When I say I think everybody knows heroin is a depressant, it's a narcotic, and it makes you sleepy, slows your heart rate, your pupils will dilate, and it's an amazingly, you're going to die from heroin use eventually, it just might take you a while. So you'll have maintenance users that live for a really long time. What you're seeing here is someone that shoots up along their waist the entire time. This is actually kind of a sad story. They shoot up over and over. This is a girl that shot up in her leg and she has abscesses. So this kid, Brian, 22 years old, this is a little bit older slide, but we talked to this kid and his dad. Nice enough kid, as you can see, looks kind of normal. He has an abscess on his arm that comes from shooting up every day because his veins have all collapsed and he can't use his veins anymore. So he shoots into the muscle, it's called muscling it, causes abscess, it dies. And he pulled up his sleeve and he's like, I'll show you what I got going on. So he's got a matching one on the other side. So what's kind of sad about this kid, and it shows him smiling. I don't think he's smiling because he's happy. He's smiling, he's kind of ashamed, and he was very sad. His dad would drive him around to deals because his dad was afraid he was going to die because he'd already overdosed a bunch of times. And this was before kind of the advent of having naloxone or Narcan available. I think everybody knows what that is. So his dad was worried that he was going to die, so his dad drove him around and showed him these deals. So he asked about prescription drugs. This is exactly what that is. It is the most abused class of drugs after marijuana, so you're right. All those things are out there. So 20% of persons 12 and over have used outside of prescription. It's 12 years old. So they get them from mom and dad, they get them from friends, and that's kind of where we see some experimentation. 63% of youth have used prescription drugs non-medically in the last year, had also used marijuana in the past years, compared to 17 who hadn't, and it's illegal to have a prescription that is not in a prescription bottle. So the reason I think that's important is when you talk to kids, they're like, well, it's a drug that they get from a doctor. I don't think it's bad for me. I can take it. And I know it says to take one on the bottle, but if I take two, it's probably not a big deal because mom and dad might take two. Maybe your friend said that's okay. So that's one of the misnomers we have when we talk about kids. So we'll talk about that in a minute, that how important it is to educate kids and parents and adults. Like prescription meds are issued by doctors, not by the guy in the corner. They're strictly regulated based on your weight, your size, your age, what you can handle. So you can't just take someone else's pills. Yes, I've taken one of my wife's Percocets once, and it's amazing. So I'm sorry. So this is kind of interesting because this was back in 2013, and they were talking about we're seeing this heroin increase and drug increases. And again, this was in 2013. This came from the Executive Office of the President of the United States. Apparently someone was in charge of this country, and they said that prescription opioid deaths are going to be a new trend, and they're really worried about them. And we didn't do anything about that. Again, the biggest problem with opiates are you're going to die. It's not a violent death. You just stop breathing. It's very quiet and peaceful, and then you never wake up. This is the tragedy that we're finding with parents and their kids. So opioids, Oxycontin, oxycodone, those are all the drugs you were talking about. These are all prescriptions that you get. Methadone is used to treat heroin addiction. And people go to a methadone clinic, they say, I want to quit heroin. The reason I want to quit heroin is it's really dangerous and I'm trying to stop. They go, great, here's your methadone. You go out on the methadone, you go out on the max line, you sell your methadone immediately. And that's what we see a lot. It's an opioid derivative. addictive. So and what it does is it reduces that craving. It's supposed to reduce the craving for opioids, which it does. Yes. And it helps with Suboxone and methadone is that you're not going to have the desire to use heroin as much. But what we see, and again, this isn't all users, so I speak very generally. What we see are users that go and get some methadone and things like that, and then they turn around and sell it for heroin because heroin's better. But that was once upon a time. These other depressants, the central nervous system depressants, Valium and Xanax, they call them Z-bars or Xannies. Those are just depressants. They help slow you down. They're also anti-anxiety. But this is significant because of a couple of reasons. All of those prescription medications are tainted now. So they're painkillers. They're used to induce a euphoric effect. They cause drowsiness, nausea, constipation. And again, when I say depressed respiration, you just stop breathing. And that's what an overdose actually is. You just stop breathing. Your body can't breathe anymore. You just get lazy. Your lungs get lazy and you're done. The drowsiness part, you'll see people you drive around anywhere in Portland, Eastport Plaza yesterday, I saw 3 people in a car, all of them are on the nod, if you've heard that. If you're a heroin or depressant user, opioid user, you'll go on the nod and you'll just start talking, and then I've had informants and they just fall asleep. They just stop. They're still breathing, they're sitting upright, everything's fine. We can go a half an hour, and when they wake up, they're in the exact same place that they were. It's like putting pause on your DVR. They're in the exact same spot. They'll pick up and they'll start talking right where they left off. It's both funny and kind of pathetic. The problem is if they're driving and they pull over in a parking lot and they use, then they can't drive and they'll wake up and they'll think, oh God, I gotta drive, and they'll go. So what we have a lot of instances is of people ramming our cars, people driving obviously highly intoxicated at high rates of speed because they have no motor control, and the information going from here to here to their foot, it's just a real interesting path, and so it just doesn't get there. So usually what happens is we see people that are using painkillers, they don't get high anymore because, if you're like me, I have a beer drinking problem on the weekends sometimes, and then what I used to drink 2 beers was great. Now I need 4 beers, now I need 6 beers, right? It sort of builds up. You get what's the word I'm looking for? Tolerance. So if you're using opioid painkillers, they're not as potent, especially if they're prescriptions. So heroin is a much better bang for your buck, and that's what we used to see. And so there's also depressants. These are Valium. I'm not going to go into them. We kind of know what they do. They make you uncoordinated. They decrease your brain activity. When you're used with other depressants like alcohol, we'll see a lot of people using depressants with alcohol, and that's where it's life-threatening. You see a lot of this sometimes with stay-at-home parents that are depressed. They get a antidepressant. They start using those depressants and they drink on top of it, and then we have some kind of suicidal ideations and problems like that. So when I'm saying users to me, it could be a guy in a car that's homeless that's shooting up. It could be a middle class stay-at-home dad who's using fentanyl. Stimulants are the same thing. Don't see a lot of it right now, but there's a few. But again, here's the thing that's kind of an interesting trend. Kids 12 to 17 who use 47% said they got into serious fights. 36% took part in group fights. 29% said they sold them, and then 22% had major depressive episodes. Again, these are 12 to 17-year-old kids. So they're using stimulants, and it might be things like Adderall that a lot of student athletes will use. Adderall is prescribed for attention deficit. You want to try to do better at school. Athletes are like, hey, I take Adderall, I breathe better, I run faster, I go farther, I'll use that. So Adderall is highly abused, highly sold, and then this is kind of the byproduct of it that we don't really see. So a regular heartbeat potentially be crazy and do stuff. We all know what cocaine is. It's making a comeback. So if you were from the 80s and cocaine was a big deal, hang on, it's kind of working its way back in. There's a little problem with it, so I'm going to go past some of this because it's not that important, but we've all seen cocaine, you know kind of what it's like, you've heard of it. This is why I got into drug work. When I was young, I watched Miami Vice. It was the coolest show ever made on television, and they always have these big coke busts. I'm like, I'm gonna do that. And in my career, I seized one brick of cocaine. I think we just don't see a lot of it here. So I'll back up real quick. Methamphetamine, you guys have heard of it?
Yep.
It's the foundation of Lents. It's so meth is the biggest scourge we have right now. I'm saving the best for last. So more meth is coming into the United States than ever before. We criminalize possession of precursor chemicals. Pat knows well about this, more than I do even. He did this before me, so I'm following his footsteps. But we used to have labs, people had meth labs everywhere, and we said you can't buy precursor chemicals from meth, and meth labs went away. So our good friends down in Mexico said, don't worry about it. We can make 10 times as much meth, just as potent, and we'll do it in super labs, and we'll ship it up in bulk. So where Pat and I once upon a time used to do a case where if you seized 1 ounce of methamphetamine, remember it's about the size of a golf ball, what was it? $1,200, $1,500, maybe $2,000.
I once paid $3,500.
Okay, so if it's tight, $3,500, $2,000 was the going rate. Right now, we just bought a half pound of meth today for $500. That's it, a half pound. There is so much of it, it's insane. So meth is a big deal because it costs our country tons of money. Always comes from Mexico. Precursor chemicals, the users now say it just takes like pure chemicals, and it is just comes up in cars, boats, however they can get here. It is the #1 hospitalization drug for overdose, and meth users tend to not overdose and die. They tend to like overdose and have like heart irregularities, or you get on a motorcycle and go 160 miles an hour. That is a meth overdose, and so people end up in hospital, and it's our #1 hospitalization overdose is meth. And that's what it looks like. That's kind of a close up. They call it ice because it looks like ice. I think that looks actually like rice, but it's clear crystal shards. Marijuana, we all know what it is. I don't really care. What I can tell you about marijuana is that it's being run by illegal enterprises. We have Chinese and Mexican nationals that are up here making and growing massive quantities of weed and shipping it out of the country and state. Down in Central Oregon, they just did like the biggest marijuana bust they ever did. I think they had 13.2 tons of meth, or I keep saying meth, I keep saying marijuana that they took out of a giant warehouse down there. So that's not, marijuana is what it is. Honey oil is something we see everywhere. The reason that's interesting is because you have to do what's called BHO extraction. It's butane honey oil. They put it in these big compression tanks with butane. They crush the marijuana down and it extracts out this oil, which is just like pure THC. And then from there, they make honey oil. Let's say once upon a time, we'll pretend all of us in this room tried marijuana. We all smoked crappy marijuana that was probably grown in some farmer's ditch. That's why they called it ditchweed. He's like, no.
I come from a big island, bro.
So you got good marijuana. So we heard about that. So that marijuana is about 30% THC if you got really good marijuana. Otherwise, it's about like 13%. THC is the part of marijuana that gets you high. Without getting too involved, CBD is the stuff that has maybe some medical effect or medical benefits. THC just gets you high. Now marijuana is up around 90% for actual plants, and if you're getting butane honey oil, as they call it, or hash oil, it's around 99%, 98%. And kids use it, adults use it, and they lose their mind. Here's the problem with butane. Butane's an interesting thing. It sinks to the ground. It's a very heavy gas. You won't even know it's there. You're walking around in it, and it only pulls up to about your ankle. And then something as named as a freezer light will ignite it. It takes nothing to ignite butane. And it will, when I say you should see the guy that opened the freezer, this is a house that exploded. The guy, after you make honey oil, you put it in your freezer to evaporate out all the butane, because butane tastes like crap and it's poison, you'll die if you ingest it. So you put it in your freezer, it evaporates all that away. Then your freezer fills with butane. you open your freezer and it's very combustible and it explodes. He was standing in front of the freezer and he is not here anymore. I mean, not here in general, he's gone. And so, like in pieces. So that's what they did there. And this is another version. The blast was so intense, hot, and explosive that it melted this is paint on the site and it shrunk all the paint. And these are all butane, individual butane canisters that they just emptied one after another. This is a big part, edibles. So when marijuana got legalized and everybody started making edibles and they did the honey oil stuff, we saw the poison control centers go through the roof with calls about my kid, my dog, my neighbor's kid, my grandpa just ate all my gummy bears and it was all THC and they were really messed up. What do I do? Bring them to the doctor. So that's what they did there. So, and of course vaping. We see everybody vaping. I'll throw this in there. If you can put it in these little vials and get that vial into your pen, you can smoke it. Fentanyl, marijuana, nicotine, you name it, can go in there, you can smoke it. So you see a little bit of everything. Doctors are seeing patients that have vaped for 10 years have the same lungs as a 40-year cigarette smoker. So when they say vaping is a healthy alternative, it's really not. What you're doing is you're burning that oil is getting into your lungs, and it burns the lungs, and it causes, I'm going to say it wrong, the alveoli, the little cilia, the hairs around those, get burned off and melted, and they can't work, so you have to get what's called a lung transplant, and I understand they're only about 5% effective, and we're seeing young people, when I say young, 25 to 35 getting lung transplants, and they're highly unsuccessful. So when you see, and kids vape, like insane amounts of kids, they just did a high school research about how many of you have vaped, and I don't know about you, I lied in high school when they said, have you ever smoked? No. So 70% of the kids said they tried it, and those are the ones that were honest. So my guess is it's probably much higher. And we all know what people under the influence of marijuana is. These are just pictures of some grows we did because this is how many plants they're growing. I mean, their entire houses are committed to growing marijuana. These are outdoor grows. These were quote-unquote medical grows back in the day. So that brings us to today. This is our big deal that we're dealing with now, especially in Portland. And this was from 2015 about this scary stuff called fentanyl. And this came out of the East Coast, and they're finding people dying because they were taking fentanyl, or taking heroin, but it was actually fentanyl. And fentanyl was kind of this new drug on the scene. If you don't know what fentanyl is, it's a very powerful painkiller. And you usually get a patch from a doctor, and that patch has micrograms. It's measured in micrograms, and that goes on your back, and then your body absorbs it over time. It's like you get 4 or 5 micrograms of fentanyl over the course of it. It's 1,000 times more powerful than morphine, and it's the real deal. And so this was 2015. They're like, yeah, it might be a thing. You guys should be careful if it comes up. We never heard of it. Be careful. So again, interesting thing. China makes fentanyl. Only 2 places make fentanyl, China and India. China has conspired with the cartels in Mexico to destabilize the United States. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's been shown over and over. I'm not here to make a political statement other than the Chinese are giving the Mexicans fentanyl and the Mexicans are selling it to us because we're number what? 1 in consumption. And we are seeing our country destabilized for it. So heroin, super expensive, stinky, hard to ship, dangerous. Fentanyl, super easy. Doesn't have an odor, dogs can't find it. And again, that was back in 2015. They said, hey, you should watch out for this. And usually graphs, you don't even have to read it. If the lines go up, that means we're doing good, right? So we're number 1. What we're seeing is stimulants. This is that methamphetamine line I talked about that is so high with unintentional drug overdose. And then the synthetic opioids is this gray line, and this is fentanyl. So for those of you over here, we kind of stabilized, and then fentanyl hit us hard a couple of years ago, and it's just on a rise. And if you look at the graph now, it's straight up. So we are just destroying our competition with fentanyl overdoses. Again, fentanyl, this is from the Oregon State Medical Examiner, so I didn't make these slides up because they look good. Methamphetamine overdoses went from 230 to 391 in the course of 1 year, and 75 to 298. So this was fentanyl, right? 2 years ago, not 3 years ago, not too big a deal. to now 300, and that's just last year, and our numbers this year are even higher. So fentanyl is the deal. This is heroin that's a lethal dose. If you were to get pure, unadulterated, laboratory-grade heroin that's made, this would be like a lethal dose. So these are 2-inch tall vials, and this is fentanyl. I think I counted these, and there are 38 grains of fentanyl in there, and that's enough to kill you. It's that powerful and that. Thank you. Helper. You smoke it. They smoke pills. So here, these are blue pills. They call them blues. So earlier we were talking about oxy. Oxy was called what's M30. So it's a 30 milligram tab of OxyContin. It's a little tiny pill. It's about the size of a Tic Tac. They're light blue, and that's what you would get from your doctor. Those are no longer available. I mean, your doctor could give you some, but you just go on the internet or you go out to the street and tell somebody, I need oxys, and they're going to sell you those blue oxys, and they're fentanyl. There is no oxy in it. Xanax, Suboxone, all of those things are now counterfeit fentanyl. No, there's no medical grade value of any of those. It's all fentanyl. And we're even finding people that are buying cocaine that is just fentanyl. Or people that are buying heroin, when we get actual heroin and we test it, it turns out it's fentanyl. So it's in everything. Users love it. These are those pills, like I said. So each of these is 1,000 pills. It's called a boat. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 5,000 pills right there. They actually did have a little bit of heroin, so that's kind of exciting for us. But that's 1,000 servings and $5 a pill. So your bang for your buck is amazing. So you're going to make a lot more money. It's a lot easier to sell. It's cheaper than heroin, and dogs aren't going to find it. And what we're finding is addicts now are using 20 pills a day, which is a lot. And I don't know how they do it. So the addicts are saying, you know what? I've got that tolerance. I have to use 20 pills. It's too much. I just want pure fentanyl. So what happened is about a month ago, we heard that a Honduran national group in San Francisco was creating powdered fentanyl, and it was rainbow colored, and they called it rainbow fentanyl, and it's being trafficked all over San Francisco, and then it ended up in Medford because it was coming to Lents, and so I dog on Lents, but I love it here. It's a great neighborhood, great community. So when they sent that up, they said, we just want pure fentanyl because it takes too long to get high off the pills. I just want pure fentanyl. So this was yesterday. We just found our first bag of rainbow fentanyl. There was a pot of gold under the rainbow. I'll let you know that. It was kind of good. And so it's here. So the thing that concerns me, if you were to see this, it looks exactly like sidewalk chalk. So if somebody left that out or left it sitting out or didn't know and they have kids and they do something, because we have drug users that don't always do the best job of being reasonable adults, you leave that out, the kid finds it, they touch it, they put it, and again, they touch it, transmit it from their hand to their mouth, they are going to die. That's just all there is to it, you die.
Exactly.
So let me give you just a quick, my soapbox is this: defund the police is over. The Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, where I work, is very supportive. We didn't see any losses. We haven't seen any losses. In fact, they're going to ratify a new contract for us. It's very generous. I'm very happy to work here, and I'm happy to serve this community. So I'm good with that. We're not going anywhere. We haven't changed how we do business. We are still arresting people. I'm still doing search warrants. We're still doing everything. Nothing's changed for me. The laws have changed a little bit. The way we do things have changed a little bit. But we worked around that, and we still think we owe it to you as citizens to do the best we can. What's a Portland police issue? So what I would tell you is this, is that fentanyl's not going to stay in your system, and it's not going to show up probably on a drug test. You don't have to worry about that. What we're worried about with contact with fentanyl is if you have skin-to-skin contact with somebody that has it on them, and it results in a potential overdose situation. And I put this picture up of a cupcake, not because I actually don't like cupcakes, but if you've ever baked cupcakes or a cake, you have to put baking powder in them and you mix it all up. If you miss a chunk of that baking powder, it gets stuck in the cupcake and you get that bite that's kind of nasty. You get that bitter taste, right? Fentanyl's kind of like that when they make fake pills. Those blue pills that we saw, they take baby powder and binder and all the things. So when you buy like pills or you buy like Advil at the store. That pill is pressed in a pharmaceutical pill press. It goes into a giant machine, and they take a pharmaceutical grade sifter that can measure out individual micrograms of acetaminophen and sprinkle it into a binder, which is usually like lactose, and they mash it into a pill. And that pill has exactly 8 milligrams of that acetaminophen in it, and then it gets put into a bottle and sold to you, and it's safe. When you're making counterfeit fentanyl pills in a basement in Mexico and using a hand pill press, you take your fentanyl, you mix it in a big jug with all the other stuff, and it's just like that cupcake. You might have one pill that has that extra little bit of fentanyl in it, or you might have one that doesn't have any. So they might smoke 2 or 3 pills and have very minimal effects because there's not enough fentanyl in it, because just trial and error of just some guy making fentanyl in the basement. And then they have the one that has a large amount of fentanyl, and that's an overkill. So that's what we're seeing. And we usually don't see contact highs from fentanyl. I don't think you're gonna have to worry about that. The contact would be if you get the powder on your skin and somehow. So usually what we know is that people aren't, and then there's ecstasy, that's just a club drug. It's basically a methamphetamine-based pill. It's similar to meth, has the same structure. We use meth to test it. You see it in raves and things like that. It kind of gives you an idea how big those pills are. This is kind of this is more along the lines of how big that fentanyl pill would be, a little bit smaller. This is why we do what we do, is I want to take their bill money. And I said, there's a pot of gold at the end of that rainbow. Under that guy's rainbow of fentanyl was a safe, and we opened the safe and we took his cash. And we use that cash, so you guys know, we take stuff from drug dealers. That's my job, is to go out and rob drug dealers illegally, and I love it. And so we take their cars and we take their cash. And because of that, I'm able to use that cash. We go through a forfeiture process, and we use that to pay for training, pay for equipment, pay for gear. So thank you all for your donations to the county in the form of taxes. It goes when people say, I pay your way. Yes, you do, but you don't pay as much as they do. So just let you know, it's a fair trade. So that's why we do what we do. This is the most important way that we can take those guys out. We can seize all the dope in the world. It doesn't matter. One of our coolest rates, we have the second largest drug seizure ever in Oregon with over 100 pounds of meth. The biggest one was because the guy fell asleep at the wheel and crashed the truck that he was driving the smuggled drugs up in, and it spilled all over the freeway. I don't think that counts, because it's just a highway patrol guy drove up on it and said, hey, are you okay? Oh, geez, look at all the meth. That was the biggest.
Where was that?
That was in Central Oregon. The guy crashed his truck, and it was just meth spilled out all over the freeway. So ours was an actual investigation. We got 100 pounds. It was great. So again, if we get 100 pounds of meth, that looks cool. It sounds great on the news. Again, Miami Vice reference earlier. That's why I wanted to do this. But this is what really actually causes them trouble, because they have to pay that back. So whoever the bad guy is, if they lost the money, if they lost the drugs, they owe that to their boss in Mexico, and they can't pay back. I think this was $110,000 in cash. It was in a crappy little apartment. And that guy owed that, plus the dope we seized. We never saw him again. We know that a cartel higher up bailed him out of jail and took him back to Mexico, which usually is a bad sign. So our justice system is better than Mexico's. I don't care what you guys think in the United States. It's a lot more fair, so that's what we do. Drug dealers usually stick to drug dealing. That's usually what they do. You're going to see dealing in your neighborhood. You're going to see hand-to-hand transactions. You're going to see people going up to cars. You'll see people using in cars. For the most part, they're not going to be violent. I should preface that with they're being more violent to the police. And yes, we are having an issue with things like if the community calls and says, I need you to go do something about this drug dealing on the corner, and I see 4 people using blue pills on foil sitting on the street curb. That's not illegal anymore. Oregon passed a law called Ballot Measure 110 that allows you to possess, and I'm not going to get into good or bad. It's horrible, but I'm not going to tell you it's good or bad. It's horrible. Horrible, horrible bill. But what it did is allowed people to possess user amounts of drugs. and it's only a violation, so I can give you a ticket. If I go up to somebody's car, they're asleep at the wheel because they're using fentanyl and they're passed out and the car's running, and this has happened to us 3 times, and we pin their cars in so they can't drive away and hurt somebody. So someone pins it from the front, someone pins it from the back, the side. We wear raid gear. We do all the things we can to keep it safe. They ram our cars anyway. We have a big incident all over what is just a ticket. So we have to be really careful and pick and choose what we do. So I hear your frustrations when you're like, what can we do? We do investigations. I don't recognize anybody here from the last time, but I will do, you guys are all going to call me tonight. I will do investigations on neighborhood problems. So if you have a house that is a chronic house and you see people coming and going all night long, you see people that are allowing people to use drugs in the neighborhood, you see break-ins, burglary crimes, all these things happening around your house, and you know what house it is, call me and I will try to help. And I'm not saying I'm going to get there tomorrow, but I will try to help. We will do what's called a frequenting warrant, where it's still against the law to allow people to come to a house. If you own a house and you let people come to your house and shoot up and use drugs, then that's illegal. You can't do that. So when people hear frequenting, they think, oh, they're going to a drug house frequently. It's actually you as the homeowner are allowing illegal activity, drugs, prostitution, and things like that to happen in your home. That's illegal. We can write a warrant for that, and we can go in and search for the crimes of frequenting, and we can seize money, drugs. And right now, guns. Guns are a huge issue. You guys have heard about it on the news. Yesterday we seized 8 firearms. Do you need one? Have one? Want one?
Not
So it's a thing. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said that you can do citations or investigations if the house is like, if it has a homeowner?
Even if it doesn't.
Oh, that's what I was gonna ask, if it's like an abandoned house.
Yeah, so I think just on the news, 56th and Flavel was just on the news. We had just done a search warrant at that house, and now it's been on the news recently about their squatters in it, they're kind of doing their thing. So it doesn't have to be the homeowner, it helps because that gives a person to charge.
Right.
It also just gives us an avenue to get in and do the warrant, and hopefully, we know it's not going to be a great big sexy case where lots of big jail sentences come down, but if it helps clean up the neighborhood, to me that's enough, and I'm happy with that. That is, anybody seen South Park? There's that teacher struggling about okay. That is the line to our office. If anybody wants to write it down, you're going to get our investigative assistant, Janet Haley. She will take your information. I don't feel like we're on a cell phone to cell phone relationship yet. We'll work it up to it. There. But that's kind of like a quick and dirty overview of what I do, what we're about. And so if I can help, I will. And I'll tell you this, we are spread thin, but we work really hard. We're a busy team. We work with Portland Police a lot. My jurisdiction is the state of Oregon and Washington. And so I'm deputized up in Washington as well as Oregon. Washington's crazy now, so some of the things we used to do there we can't do anymore, but they're fixing it. Oregon is fixing it. We made some mistakes with some ballot measures. We made some mistakes with how they charge drug laws, and they are working to fix it because they realize it was a mistake. So I always believe in hope. My grandpa used to say shit in one hand, hope in the other, and tell me which one fills up first. I don't touch shit, so I'm hoping it gets better, and I think it is getting better. And so hang in there with us. We'll get it done, and that's all I got. I run over time. Are we all right, Pat?
I'm good.
All right. Like I said, Mr. Williams started this before I did, and he did this before I did, and so he has a wealth of knowledge, and he can challenge anything I say.
Questions.
Yeah, any questions? Go ahead.
How many are on your team?
I have 5 right now, and I'm trying to get 1 more. And we are, it's me and 4 investigators. And then we have, as I mentioned, the U.S. Marshals. I can't work this. We have a fugitive person. And so what we'll do is we will
I think I saw.
I'm sorry.
I
We'll
saw that.
team up with those other teams and it kind of helps us. Like yesterday's warrant with the fentanyl thing, I think the guy had 8 firearms and things like that. We teamed up with Portland Police with that, with their neighborhood response team.
That was
So we have to help each other out. They're short and we're short. We're just short bodies because it's hard to hire police officers right now.
So the other question is, and I know probably everyone in here has seen this, but my husband and I have been in a restaurant where we've seen drug abusers that are doing the drop. I mean, they just are at the table and they drop.
Yeah.
And
It's that fast.
and they're not passed out, but they're sitting there, and you have everybody looking around like.
That's being on the
What do
nod.
you-
You literally
so-
just stop.
So my question is, they're wanting us to approach people and give them referrals and ask them, and I would never do that in that
Yeah.
instant. But with everything going on
Yeah.
that you've shared tonight, with fentanyl being as bad as it is, I mean, I can't see us approaching people on the street right now to ask if they want to get off the street and refer them, because you don't know where
Right.
that
The-
person's at. So my question is, who do we call?
So, well.
Who would you call the very first?
I would, if you can call, so, and again, I'm not gonna speak for Portland, I don't work for Portland Police, I know they have a huge issue right now, it's a thing. They really are down bodies. They have this street response group, whoever
Right.
they are.
And we're on.
My experience with them is they're not available either most of the time.
They're not.
So, the best thing that I can say when I've tried to help other community members, and we did one on 70th and Flavel a little while back. Being out in your yard, being out in your neighborhood, knowing your neighbors, kind of that unified front. And if you all are out and you see people and say, hey, take that elsewhere. They usually leave. I work like this and people don't know who I am, and I'll pull up next to people and say, hey, why don't you just get out of here? You don't need to do that here. And they'll leave. Or maybe I say it a little bit different, but it's very similar. But again, I know that I have the backup of a team if I need it and all that. So I wouldn't engage in conflicts with them or confrontations. Yeah. I think it's fine to say, hey, why don't you get out of my neighborhood, man? We're trying to keep our neighborhood clean. And the more they see that, the cleaner your neighborhood is, the better you keep your yards, you keep derelict cars out, things like that. It's that detractor from people wanting. They'll be like, someone's gonna call on us here.
One last
Yeah.
comment and question. Is there any way that you could, and probably this will go to TriMet too, but keep an eye on this cul-de-sac down here. We cannot use the Flavel Max station because of it.
Okay.
There is a huge problem there.
This gentleman is going to fix that 100%.
Well, I know that.
Accountability and make up a.
I know you guys have tried very hard, but there's where these lines cross.
Yep.
And
So Multnomah County Sheriff's Office is the governing branch of the TriMet law enforcement. I see it back there, hang on. It is the governing agency for, TriMet's kind of a weird, I won't even try to explain it. It's this crazy government organization they have more money than God. They're pretty cool. So the Sheriff's Office, though, does the law enforcement piece of TriMet. And so we have a team there. If there's a problem area and you can address it, that team, because I work with them, I know who they are, they can call us. We can do missions, we can do all kinds of stuff to help with
well,
that.
that whole section down there there's an elderly woman that oversees that property there, and she can't arm herself.
No.
And she is constantly being berated and approached and threatened, and even coming over the fences and cutting.
So here's my commitment to you tonight, just because I'm here and I'm addicted to going after people that cause citizens problems. I will absolutely try to help with that.
Thank you.
Tell Pat where you're at. It's right here on where? Which one?
It's the cul-de-sac right by the church.
Okay.
Right there. I mean, I used to park there when I would go downtown.
On this side.
It's on
That side.
Jehovah's Witness
Okay.
Church.
Okay.
It's just down the hill.
I passed it.
Yeah.
I'm talking about down at the bottom.
At the bottom, yeah,
bottom
the
of the
hills.
hill.
Okay. So our commitment is let's find a way to do that, and we can work on that problem.
I appreciate
100%.
that.
Yeah. We'll
it's
just
gotten,
make a commitment to do
it's
it.
gotten better, but it's still, you can't go down there without seeing a drug deal
Yeah.
or even sex trafficking.
I'm only committing to one neighborhood problem that I know.
Yeah.
So she already got it. Real quick before she's been waiting. Yes,
Go
ma'am.
What percentage of all these shootings would you say are gangs fighting for territory?
0.
Really?
Yeah, it's gangs fighting over drug distribution, prostitution, and just retaliation. There's no turf war. There's no turf war in Portland. It's just gang members that don't like each other. And they're white gangs, black gangs, brown gangs. It's all gangs. It's just gun violence is crazy right now. I have my own theory. I don't really. It has to do with fentanyl abuse. That's my opinion, but that's all I can.
Yeah, we hear it all night.
How many gangs are there?
I don't know. There's a whole bunch of them. There's a bunch of white gangs, a bunch of black gangs, a bunch of Mexican gangs. There's a bunch of them. Oregon doesn't have a massive gang problem. We have a little bit of a gang problem, but they cause a lot of problems and a lot of harm. But we don't have a massive. I don't want to take you out one more.
Yeah, a little bit of drug history. Back in the 60s in the San Francisco area, we had something they called the Farm County Lab Report.
Mm-hmm.
And it was done every week over a local rock and roll station, where people would send in samples of their drugs, all kinds of drugs, all kinds of pills. The Farm County Lab would test them and then publish the contents, the description of the sample, so you could know that it was your sample that they sent in. Any sort of information you gave as the person who wants it tested, and they would read all that out and then what was in the pill and whether it was, extremely dangerous or not. This was done over the radio every week.
Huh. Maybe we should start that. They could just say it's fentanyl every time.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more. What's that?
It'll be on Keystone.
That's right. Okay.
At 12 o'clock on Friday, so I was like, whoa.
It was a more civilized time. I will give you that. So I'm gonna let Pat go because I gotta get going.
Okay.
Thank you all for everything.
Hey, before I get started, I want to recognize Matt and his team. I've worked with a lot of dope teams all over the West Coast, and these guys are some of the best we will ever find. I will say that to the bitter end. Multnomah County Sheriff's Office Drug Enforcement Special Investigations Unit is the real deal. These guys do more with less. They do a lot, and they are on it. So kudos to Matt.
Thanks, Pat. That's very generous. Thank you very much. All in his footsteps.
Well, when I lack an ability, I make the denial. So I'll get going. I won't go into a bunch of drug stuff. I can sit and tell stories for hours and hours. What I will say is that we're seeing this on our system, and it's a huge deal. So just a little quickly about me. He mentioned I came from a law enforcement background, 32 years. I came to you folks last year for a presentation, and so I retired in 2019, and this is what it looks like to be retired. I used to look like that. And so my drug experience in drug enforcement, a little bit about my career. I spent a lot of time in a local drug unit, but I also spent close to 5 years in a federal drug unit, so it was all over the West Coast and got to do some international work. So what he's talking about with the stuff coming in, he is spot on about it. I saw the late 90s, early 2000s when pills were starting to get into the mix. We were seeing a huge influx of pills coming in, but it was typically ecstasy. And we saw a lot of other, Percocet and in the beginning phase of opioid use. So again, now we've evolved to what it is. And when he's talking about, where you hit these people where it counts is you seize their assets. It's all legitimate, but that's how you stop the traffickers. So my PowerPoint isn't working, but I don't want to bore you folks with slides. And so I want to talk a little bit about what I was asked to come and speak about. And this is what I received. Topic will be safety on TriMet buses and the MAX. So it sounds like TriMet is currently, there was a man in the group physically attacked while leaving a bus. Someone hit him over the head with a plastic PVC pipe. Persons are riding the system often attack bus operators. And that you want to know how TriMet is addressing violence and how much is actually happening. Is the news making it a bigger issue out of this, or is it truly occurring? So I've got some numbers for you to show what's really impacting your area. And let me back up just a little bit. I will say, as a little kid, I grew up in Mid-County, Gresham area. I used to play soccer at Lents Park. I have been all over this area. I leased this area back in the day when the sheriff's office actually had patrol land. I started my career with Multnomah County Sheriff's Office and then ended my career with the city of Gresham. So about first third in Gresham, and then the second first third in Multnomah County, the second the last 2/3 in Gresham. However, about a third of my career was inside the city of Portland. Just thank God not for the city of Portland. I jokingly say that, but I worked a lot of my career in the city in task forces and things like that, and community policing office. So I'm very, very familiar with your challenges here. Got a lot of friends who live in this neighborhood, and I spent a good majority of my youth in these neighborhoods. So what I'm talking about for security stats in your particular association area are reports to our database and customer service complaints that come in through Triman employees. They come in through our security staff. They come for cleanups. We've had 266 reported incidents in this particular neighborhood. That may not mean much to you, but what that does is that breaks it down a little bit further to show we had 14 disruptive incidents at the Lents platform. Southeast Division had only one.
Is this
Fuller's-
by year?
What's that?
Is this by year? In what
This
time period?
is by year, just for this year. So we've had a total of 57 incidents at all of your platforms. I can tell you, and with that, I'm just going to bore you and probably confuse you with these numbers since you can't see them on screen. What I can tell you where our problems are, and I'm not going to sit and read off of this. What I can tell you where our problems are is the starting at Gateway on the Green Line coming south. We have a lot of incidents at Gateway because it's a hub. So we have just a ton of traffic in and out of there. We have somebody at the Main Street Park and Ride full-time as far as a security officer stationed there. And the reason why we have that full-time is because we've dedicated a security officer there for our transportation unit.
This makes it really hard.
Because of the project going on at the Powell Bus Garage, that's a multi-year project, construction project. So we're having to bus employees down to that because they have nowhere to park. So we have a full-time security person posted at Main Street that is helping us with problems there. Most of the problems there in Gateway are stolen catalytic converters. And if you know anything about that, what I would encourage you to do is look at, you can go on YouTube if you don't know how that whole process works. Type in Bay Area News Report catalytic converter theft. And you'll see about a 5-minute story that one of the local camera crews down there did. And it really outlines what the motivating factor on these thefts are and how fast it occurs. So typically what you'll see is people will come in, they'll steal anywhere from 1 to 20 or 30 catalytic converters in a very, very short period of time. Typically what you will see is somebody will drop them off, they'll walk through the parking lot, they'll roll down on the ground, they'll usually have a small little sawzall, and they'll cut it out in about 20 or 30 seconds, and they're gone. And so they'll do several of them. Toyota Priuses are the #1 target because they can get the best filament out of the actual catalytic converter, but they'll hit a lot of other cars. So then continuing south, we have obviously Holgate, Foster, and Lavelle is what's in your area. All 3 of those stops, we have challenges there. We have a lot of drug use. Not a ton of, I shouldn't say, I would say Flavel is probably our biggest problem with drug use. And the reason why is because of the camps in the area. Yeah. So we have a security officer posted down there. However, I'm limited in my security staff. When I came to TriMet a couple years ago, I had approximately 75 to 80 officers. And at one point I was down to 42. It's that hard to get people to work security in the city of Portland just because of the challenges going on. I had 4 officers the first year get their jaws broken. And I have people say to me, well, what did they do to provoke it? They didn't do anything. They're trying to simply do their job. So what we are doing is we're trying to make sure we protect the security by putting them in pairs and giving them very specific instructions. We're giving them a lot of training. However, What has happened recently is I've been able to change our contract, so I've increased the pay for our security, and we're starting to get more people apply. So just in the last month and a half, I've increased our staffing by 16 officers, actually 20, but I lost 4 just because they were either moving out of the area.
So is the car that sits down there, and right where the bus stops,
Yeah.
and they sit right there?
That's a security officer, yeah.
By
And so
the
we
house.
do have cars, or security contractors, so they're not TriMet staff, they're contracted security. So we do have several cars that say Allied Universal Security on it, but sometimes they have to use their own cars. And sometimes they've been pulled away from that platform or that station just because we have control staff. Yes, yes, sir. Do you have a question?
Yes, so if you're saying that your security teams are now working in twos?
Well, most of the time they're in twos.
Okay, the other question then I have is, since Lents is probably higher crime area for you, if that could be a focus, and is there a way they can be more visible? Now, I know they're pretty vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think they're more vulnerable if they're like sitting ducks there.
They are, and
And I feel for them, but I mean, I think if there was more of a visibility that the people, the criminality that's going on around there might think twice.
The challenge with security is that if you look at the charter for a security officer as opposed to a police officer is sworn to an oath of office to protect the public and to enforce the laws that govern us, okay? So you take your oath of office to protect the community and enforce the laws. Security is hired to protect somebody's property, and then they observe and they report crime to the police. Now, if somebody's being assaulted, they can jump in and they can stop that assault, just like I can, because I'm a private citizen. But generally speaking, they're not necessarily going to take that effort unless they have to. We've had several officers intervene and stop somebody from being assaulted. I'm proud to say we had an officer revive somebody the other day that did 9 minutes of chest compressions on somebody and revived them, saved their life. So anyway, let me press on with this. I want to talk about some of the programs that we are working on. So one of the issues that we've recognized is bus operator assaults. So that's one of the first things that I'm trying to stop is bus operator assaults. So TriMet has installed bus barriers, we call them, and you may have seen them in the buses. They're a clear glass barrier that protects the officer. It doesn't completely enclose the bus operator inside there, but it does a huge amount. When you look at the video that we see, most of the assaults on the operators, if you're the operator, it's somebody walking by and they'll kind of throw their fist at him and hit him in the arm, the head, the body. They'll try and punch him, and now they have a barrier they have to kind of go around. So what that does is it creates a barrier, but it also gives the operator a little bit of time to kind of move and see it coming. That doesn't stop people from actually hitting them. Sometimes they get through, but a lot of times they throw things at them or they spit at them. So we're doing our best with that. There are a lot of different types of styles of barriers. We have to use what we have in our buses, and we have to fit them around it, so we call that a retrofit. But I'm happy to say we've outfitted all of our buses, and we're just, I think we're right around 700 buses in our fleet, and we're about 150 trains in our fleet. So we've upgraded all of our buses with CCTV cameras. We already had cameras, but what we have now is we have upgraded all of them, so when they roll into a yard, they download on Wi-Fi. And then we schedule the video of anything going on there to be downloaded specifically for the team that works for me in our CCTV unit. So we help the police more than ever with our video systems. We help them put together their investigations because, of course, everybody is skeptical nowadays. If it's not on video, it didn't happen. And so we recognize that, and I've got probably over 8,000 cameras on the system-wide on platforms, buses, and trains, and in our facilities. We're upgrading them with current technology, digital technology. A lot of the cameras have 4 cameras on them now. They have pan, tilt, zoom capabilities. So low light capabilities, it's really, really impressive to see what's out there. So that's one of the things we're doing. We've increased lighting. So if you go down, for example, down to Clackamas Town Center, you'll see the garage down there. It literally looks like an aircraft carrier at night because it's so light. We've done that at Gateway, we've done that at Park Rose, we've done that at, I think that Sunset is complete, and I've got about 13 other locations scheduled throughout the next year. I've already completed the garage at Gresham, and we're doing several platforms along there. We call this, we're enhancing this, but there's something called crime prevention through environmental design. You've probably heard about this. It's referred to as CEPTED. It's been around since the 70s, nothing new. However, what we are doing is we're training a number of our staff to go through some of the classes just to know what that really means. And then working with some of our design and architecture folks, our engineering staff, to say when you upgrade a platform, we're changing the design criteria in what we do so that it will meet CEPTED standards. And so what we heard loud and clear from most of the surveys we've done is most of the women want light. Rightly so. That makes people feel safe. Okay? There was a big push to try to have low lighting. I don't know why, but I've heard of light pollution. But we have been able to push this through, so we're teaming up with our facility staff, and we've been doing a lot of upgrades throughout the system. We also recognize that cleanliness is a huge thing. Cleanliness goes to godliness. I mean, that's an issue. And so we are trying to pair up our facility staff. As I start putting more security out on the system, I'm going to be able to hopefully put a security officer with the people that are out working late at night, cleaning the system, because they've been challenged. And they've been challenged by a lot of folks that have been causing problems. So that's being done. We've created what we call a rapid response center. And what that is we are manning a desk behind a bunch of cameras, system-wide, that can watch cameras all the day and night. And then when a call comes in about a security incident, we can try and get that resolved as soon as possible. We also recognize that if things are not clean, that makes people feel uncomfortable. So we're addressing the biohazards with that. When I say biohazards, that could be needles, pipes. Most of it is feces and urine. We used to have approximately 25 incidents a week for biohazards. We're over 300 now a week. So it's a huge issue for us. And so we recognize we have to keep the system clean. So like I said, we're trying to increase our security presence. We renewed a different contract with a different security contractor just earlier this week, and I'm hoping to get several dozen more security. But I've got enough funding, thanks to our general manager and COO. Sam DeSue and Bonnie Todd have just been fantastic for TriMet as far as recognizing our need to increase security. So they've allowed me to increase the contract to pay more. And so that's been the challenge in the past. And so with this new increase, I'm getting more and more applications. So I'm hopeful that this is going to be a help for us. And with that, we also recognize that there's a reduction in law enforcement on the system. The transit police is down actually to about 28% of their allotted staffing. And so we have to figure out new ways to help law enforcement maximize their efforts. And I recognize through digital technology and other technology out there that I can help them with their investigations. So you may have heard this before. It's called the Reimagine Public Safety Campaign. We started that a couple of years ago, and it was right after the unfortunate incident with George Floyd and the protesting. I had already started making changes to try and get more security out on the system, but we started polling our community, our ridership, our staff. We did surveys, we did focus groups. We convened a group called a Blue Ribbon Task Force. And there were 14 people, mostly from around the metropolitan area, but we actually had 3 or 4 people from around the country who are transit subject matter experts, law enforcement, social services, homelessness, mental health, substance abuse issues. And we asked them, what do we have to do? We overwhelmingly heard, don't get rid of the cops, okay? But figure out a different way to use the police. So be more deliberate in how you use police officers, to be more effective to just deal with criminal activity. have more presence on the system, and that presence could be security, it could be TriMet staff, it could be just people out helping. So we've done that, and so we have created a program called the Safety Response Team. So we started this pilot project almost a year ago, and they fall under my division, and we started with 24 of these folks. And I'm happy to say that we're going to expand that program, we're going to double it. So now we are going to, by next year, hopefully have a total of 48 of them out on the system. And when you see these people out there, they're dressed in the same blue security uniform that one of our security Portland Patrol uses, but they have very distinctive reflective marking and patches that say Safety Response Team. What these people are is a mixture of people with lived experience, meaning they've had substance abuse problem, mental health, they've been homeless maybe. We've got a mixture of folks like that. We have a mixture of people who are actual subject matter experts, either counselors, advanced degrees. We've had a couple people with multiple master's degree, but a lot of them are people with bachelor's or associate degrees that want to get into that field or have experience in that field. So we're real happy with that. And when it started, there was a lot of reluctancy for us to do it because our staff and customers said, we want more security. We don't need this kind of stuff. But what we're seeing now after a year is that people are saying, this is really good. Because what they're doing is they're making social service referrals. So we are literally getting on the ground level to make contacts with our community to refer people. And so when you see homeless camps, a lot of times when they're on our property, like the ones down there, you'll see they're across the street because I've had them moved off of our property. However, when they are on our property, we will send these people and some others out to try and get referrals to get them into housing. So that's been a real positive thing for us. They've had several interventions out on our system and have helped us. So we know that that's a positive thing. Yes.
You still have fare inspectors?
I'm going to get to that. So they're called, that's next on my list, they're called customer safety supervisors. That was a deliberate choice on our part because we were told fare inspector, they're more like police. People didn't like it, they didn't want to hear about it, and so we changed that. But we also, what we did was we changed their role to a certain degree. They were out enforcing code of conduct, but they're also recognizing when there's inclement weather, when it's hot or cold, they're not enforcing fare. Now, they're going to enforce code of conduct if somebody's being disruptive, but they're not going to be saying, hey, I need your fare. It's 110 degrees, I don't care, but if you don't have your fare, you're going to get a ticket. That's not happening. What they are is they're out there, they're the eyes and ears of our system, helping us to keep things moving. And we've run across several medical problems that we've been able to get help for. And so we've really kind of transitioned their roles so they really are out there helping to keep the system moving. Yes?
How big is that team?
So that team started, when I took over, we had 3, and they were fare inspectors. Then I got them up to 18. I just now am able to double it. So we're literally in the process of hiring another 18, actually 19 total. So we're going to double that, and I'm not going to stop there. I think our equilibrium will be somewhere around 50 or 60, I hope. But they're out on the system, and they're 7-day-a-week coverage. So we're slowly expanding, and we're trying to be very deliberate to hit all the spots. The majority of their efforts are on the rail side, just because we hit the most people, but we recognize they need to be on buses. I'm trying to build the program. That's what I'm saying. I've literally taken 3 people and turned them into almost 40 in less than 3 years. So the system only works so much, and I can only allocate dollars so often.
Right.
So it's a very, very complex problem to increase the amount of staffing and to manage that staffing. Our request for CCTV coverage is increased almost 1,000%. Our problems on the system are not new to anybody. They've been around forever. I rode the system as a student. I policed the system in uniform. I worked the system undercover, and now I manage from TriMet's perspective. So I've seen every aspect of it, and I still ride the system. So I know what's going on out there, and I'm trying to get people out there. But we also recognize that we have a mental health and substance abuse crisis on our hands, and we have to do our part. And I will never tell people you should expect to deal with things like that. That's inappropriate. I would never tell my family, and I would never tell you folks to just deal with it. What I would tell you is just be mindful that we have a lot of unpredictable people out roaming our society right now, and to recognize that sometimes it's best to stand clear. Sometimes it's best to go, hey, please don't do that. I do it all the time, and I'm dressed just like this, but I don't have conflicts with people because I know where my limits are. And I don't expect everybody, I wouldn't expect you to go tell somebody, hey, quit smoking fentanyl. But I do know that if there's a presence nearby, most of the time people will walk away and do it somewhere else.
You mentioned your rapid response center, and that section watches those cameras. How does that team interact with the local police?
That's a great question. So what we've been able to do is use existing staffing. We haven't opened this up to the public to call in. We're trying right now, and I could go on for hours about this, but I'm trying to get software that will help us better manage what we have going on out there with our staffing, much like a 911 dispatch center. But how they interact with law enforcement, for example, we had a couple of homicides that occurred just in the last, I think they were early July. And it was early July. And they were feeding real-time information to the law enforcement. And so my CCTV manager, he interacts with law enforcement daily, hourly. And so we've really developed a good relationship with our transit police, Portland Police. Portland Police deals with the majority of the problems inside Multnomah County just because that's where the focus of most of our rail and bus lines are. And so, again, I worked with a lot of Portland police officers. I mean, the last couple of years of my career as a lieutenant in the division where I managed over 50 officers and sergeants. And so I still have a lot of relationships with people. And so we're all still working with them. It's just that we've changed our leadership model over to the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, and that was literally driven by a lot of political decisions going on inside the city. The other thing I want to talk about is our transit police has been running missions, and I don't have numbers on this, but I can say it's safe to say that they have done some very focused missions on drug use on platforms and in our transit centers, and they've been very successful. So they do what Matt does, and they've actually used some of Matt's folks. And what they're doing is they're trying to get rid of these folks that are just openly using drugs. And it doesn't stop everybody all the time, but it makes an impact. And when these people that are just standing around doing what they do, and they see somebody walk away with some bracelets on, they realize, oh, I guess I can't do that anymore. They've issued a ton of citations as well in the last month or two. So we are making progress with that. I'm sending our customer safety supervisors, our fare inspection teams, out with police to work on missions. And police no longer for trying to do fare enforcement, they do not inspect people's fares. We actually changed the law that doesn't allow them to do that. However, they go out and support them so they don't get assaulted. And so when we have law enforcement out with our customer safety supervisors, we have a lot of impact on our system. So the last thing I want to cover is fentanyl and other questions you may have. That's a real snapshot of what we're doing. I could probably go on for another hour or two, but fentanyl we recognize is a huge deal. And what I would say is, like Matt talked about earlier, it's essentially legal to carry. And so it's hard for us to track all the complaints going on. And by the time we get there, person's gone. A person could be lighting up. What you see these guys smoking it off of foil. I see it every day, right? I go down Burnside to and from work. And I do that deliberately so I can watch platforms. And I usually see 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people smoking on the platform. They'll go in the corner of a shelter or a bus shelter, or they get on the train and they'll light the fentanyl underneath the foil, and they use a straw to inhale the fumes of the vapors from it. So that usually lasts about 10 to 15 seconds at the most, and then they're done. And so by the time we can get the report, they're long gone. And by the time a person even gets done dialing, they're done. So it really is an epidemic, and I think, like Matt said, there's folks trying to change that in the legal system to deal with it. It's a huge issue as far as narcotics trafficking. I can tell you they're coming across the border just unchecked. And there's not a whole lot we can do when that is, it's coming in. So with that, I'll entertain.
Hold on.
What I do hear is that people are smoking, but I don't ever hear they're spraying. Now, they could be spraying something else. I've been categorized in court as an expert in narcotics, okay? I can't tell you what somebody's smoking. What I can tell you is, I can see a drug addict a block away. I can tell you how they walk and how they look, if they're a heroin addict. I can tell you if they're a meth user. I can tell you if they're probably on crack, based on the behavior. And that's based on my years of experience doing thousands of hours of surveillance. However, I can't tell you if a person's smoking meth or fentanyl if they're in a corner. They're smoking something. What I would tell you is they're probably going to be an unpredictable behavior, so I don't want to go up and confront them. So what I have seen personally is seeing people spray some type of aerosol. I've approached people spraying aerosol usually because they're high. And they're doing unpredictable things. They'll pull things out of their pocket, they light things, they fidget, they pull spray out, they do all kinds of stuff. What we do as a policy for TriMed is we recognize that fentanyl use is dangerous. So, and I would say to all of you, just like of our staff, any of our customers, I wouldn't want myself or my family exposed to it, so I don't want you exposed to it. We are looking, and actually what's going on right now is I just went to Denver last week and I took a team down there, and we're on the front end of some pretty innovative things as far as trying to deal with this chaos on our systems, like so many people around the country. But what we found from them is some people said that they are well known that there is no danger to people for secondhand smoke of fentanyl. I don't know if I buy that. However, what we are doing, TriMed is doing, is dedicating some funding towards a study that's going on at the University of Washington. And so we're teaming up with Sound Transit and King County to help expedite this process. And when we were down in Denver last week, we found out that a number of agencies across the nation, transit agencies, are doing the same. They're going to join in with us to help us. And the reason why we're doing this is because we need to know what are the effects of our customer and our staff. What should we do when we have a report of somebody smoking on the system? So what we have done now is we've said there's no data out there to show exactly what the effects are. So we are going to be safe and we're going to stop a train or a bus for 15 minutes and let it air out. Now we've learned that some agencies only stop for about 2 or 3 minutes at the most. But what that does for us is it shuts our system down. So that impacts all of our riders. And when people talk about vulnerable population, I'm going to ask them, what about our vulnerable population who is transit dependent and has to get to a job? And what happens if they're late to work or an appointment? They either get fired or they don't get their appointment. So we have to be very mindful. Like law enforcement is mindful of how fast they respond to a call for service, we are mindful of how much delay in our system it impacts our customer, because that sends a shockwave like a ripple across the pond. So these issues, we're trying to address them as much as possible. What I tell all of my staff is they are expected to confront somebody who is smoking fentanyl. How they confront them is up to them. So I confronted some folks in the Gateway Garage about a month ago when I was with a couple of the executives from the Oregon Clinic. And how I addressed it would be about like me to you, sir. And I said, you can't smoke fentanyl in a garage. And the guy looked at me and said some offhanded remarks, and expecting that I would kind of cower and walk away. And I said, hey, you can't smoke fentanyl in the garage. You have to go somewhere else. And he started yelling, I'm not smoking fentanyl. I could see the pipe and I could see the lighter in his hand. And I could literally see the foil. So I was born at night, it just wasn't last night. So I said, hey, I said you can't smoke it here. If I have to call the police officer around the corner, I will. And then the guy realized, oh, this guy's not going to stop. Well, I could tell the executives with me are like, oh my God, we're going to get a fight, we're going to get a fight. And the guy stopped, and you could tell he was thinking about it. And I said, you need to go out of the garage. And he walked away. And that was it. That was enough to stop this person. I didn't need to run over and threaten him. I don't need to get in his face. I don't need to tell him, you're getting arrested. It just stopped him. And that's the best I could do right now. Would I expect you to do the same thing? No. But maybe you would say, you act like you're on the phone and looking at them. I do that all the time. And when somebody sees somebody looking at them on the phone, maybe they're calling the police. Maybe they're calling security. So little things like that I tell our staff to do. If there's 2 or 3 of them in uniform, have them go. There's safety in numbers. Have them go up and stay back. And don't, output your coverage here. Don't put yourself in harm's way, but try and address the issue. So that's what we're telling our staff to do. And the other thing we have done along this line is we've been doing a lot of training for our staff because we recognize that there's a huge void with law enforcement right now. So we're giving them a lot of training and de-escalation skills. And we're spending a ton of money, but it's well worth it. So what it's doing is it's helping our staff recognize the problem and how to effectively deal with it, and also recognize sometimes they don't need to just rush into a problem. So think of the law enforcement in shooting. When you see, these are always highlighted on TV. They'll show a police shooting, and a lot of times people say, well, why did they have to shoot? Or why couldn't they have shot them? They were in so far into a problem that they really had no way to back out of it. And so that's kind of the mindset I tell our staff. You don't have firearms, you don't have tools to protect yourself. So be mindful. Don't rush into a problem that you can't get out of. Take a very small step towards the problem and confront it little by little. I hope that makes sense. So any questions from
Just real quick, you talk about you're spending all this money on this research and things like that about how the secondhand smoke could affect people and things like that. Do you feel that that's money well spent, or could that money be spent better on more personnel to make sure that the people that are riding the system are safe?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a legitimate question. And I think it is money well spent, and here's why. We owe it to our staff and customers to know what are the health impacts on them. And so that's what this study is really what is the impact health-wise. So think of OSHA, think of unsafe work environment. This is going to be measured in more of an analytical way through labs and some testing. And what they're talking about doing is literally being out there with tools that can measure the amount of smoke that is released. They're talking about doing touch point, examinations of is there residue left over. And for example, Denver, RTD, the regional transit system down there, they did a test of one of their bathrooms in their central station, and they found trace amounts of fentanyl, and they closed it down. It's been closed down for like 6 or 7 months. It's a huge impact on the system. But they don't even know if that's enough to impact a person, but they were cautious enough.
I understand that part, but can't we just get more staff to actually eradicate that problem, so that way that's not even an issue?
No, because the amount of money that we're putting, we're still not going to cover the staff. I mean, We're talking tens of thousands on this as opposed to, just one staff member. That's a much bigger investment. But again, we don't have enough staff, but I don't think the amount of staff, is going to solve this problem. This needs to be some legislative change, and especially some protection on the borders, because I could talk about that for hours and hours. I've worked border cases for about a month.
I'm interested in how you work between the unarmed staff and then armed people. Things escalate to that point.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because if we want a model where we have more unarmed security people, that backup has to be there.
It has to be there, yeah. So it's really a multi-phase approach. With the training to unarmed staff, they can better assess what's going on, and then they can get the reports to our dispatch to say, we need police here. Let me give you an example. We have a problem with weapons on our system. A lot of these weapons are people carrying backpacks with a club, a bat, a machete, because they're living unhoused. And these are really the tool of their environment to try and help them live. A lot of them are not threatening towards anything. However, they're very threatening. If you're sitting next to somebody with a machete, that's very threatening and could cause a lot of damage. I was with a police chief driving down Grand Avenue, and I saw a woman dressed in professional attire that had a belt on with a machete hanging on it. She worked in an office downtown. She's walking down a sidewalk wearing a machete. she's that concerned about her safety. Never seen that. But that's what's going on today. So what we tell people is if somebody gets on the train or bus with a firearm and it's openly carried and legal in this state, we don't allow weapons on our system. However, the Constitution guarantees that. We tell our operators, call dispatch, get police headed that way. So there is no delay. Now, if somebody gets on and they've got a knife, which is illegal to carry, but it's a person who clearly is not threatening anybody, that's not as much of an impact to everybody on the system. So we have to try and de-escalate that problem, and hopefully our staff can advise them that needs to go inside a backpack. It can't be openly carried, or you're gonna have to step off the system. They have to be very careful about how they approach that person. So, just.
Someone on fentanyl, after they smoke, how long are they in their little world?
You know, that's a good question. So think about it if you have a couple drinks. How long are you feel intoxicated as opposed to somebody that might be larger, somebody my size? So the same thing goes with fentanyl, and I think Matt really hit it on the head when he was talking about they could be smoking some fentanyl that really doesn't have much fentanyl in it. I was jogging a couple of weeks ago about 5:30 in the morning on Springwater Trail, and I saw a guy standing on the side of the trail smoking fentanyl at 5:30 in the morning. Like, holy cow. You know, so I see it all day long, and I didn't realize they're smoking up to 20 pills a day. So the reality is, it could impact people differently. And it really comes down to what is their tolerance because again,
Final question.
we don't always get the report of it right away. Let me give you an example of an incident when I first came to the transit police. Got a call of a person carrying a gun on a bus. It was passed out. Openly carrying a gun. Okay. By the time police can catch the bus, the report came in at 29th and Sandy. By the time they got the bus, it was at 102nd and 122nd. It's a big distance. Fighting traffic, 10, 20, 30 minutes, probably about 20 minutes. The reality is our system is moving all the time, and we don't have people to go 533 square miles to cover every bus. I mean, over 700 buses and 150 trains. Now, not all of them are out on the system that much, or at once, but it is a daunting task force. And so we recognize, and I haven't talked about, we have stats that show our bus lines that are more prevalent to disruptions, and that's where I try and focus on.
So you're on the bus, we see something that's not right, okay, so do we call 911, do we talk to the bus drivers, what do we do?
Yeah, and that's a good question. What would you think, and this comes down to your discretion, of what is so egregious that you would want to stop or have the person removed? And you have to ask yourself the question.
Not so much that they need help, they're in having a mental challenge.
Yeah.
Or they're covered in, they just keep their pants, something like that. You said you have that rapid response. So would you call 911 and ask you to be patched to private?
What I would do is I would tell the operator, the bus operator, and say, hey, we have a person back here, can you please let somebody know that they need some help? And so they can make a call to our dispatch.
Gotcha.
We have something called the Operations Control Center, and that's basically the bus and rail dispatch, like a 911 system.
Work through the drive.
Work through the driver. Now, if somebody's safety is in jeopardy, if somebody, is in immediate, imminent fear, then call 911.
Okay.
Yeah. So, any other questions? Okay.
Can we Narcan on the buses? Do the operators have access to Narcan?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Do the bus operators have access to Narcan? Because I have seen people nodding out big time on the buses.
Narcan. No, they don't. And that's a question we get quite a bit. Well, I get operators ask me, why can't I carry mace? Why can't I carry pepper spray? Why can't we carry tasers? And it really comes down to, from a management perspective, we're not going to take on that type of challenge because there's training that goes along with it, and then sometimes there's inappropriate use. For Narcan, most law enforcement are all carrying them. We're working towards getting security to carry them. But with that, you have to have a prescription. And so we're actually trying to figure it out with the county. to get that prescription filled, but it's not as simple as it seems, you would think. But I think we're gonna get there. And I know that, like I said, I've mentioned Denver several times, and I know a lot of their staff, security there, at least one of the agencies that was there was talking about how all their security is carrying it. But I know that law enforcement revives people every day.
Yes, the transit police, our transit police would be carrying it.
Yeah, the transit officers are, but not the security. And so we're working through that. And, some of the security companies, they're fearful of the liability. But I don't think there's that much, quite honestly, I'm no attorney, but I don't think there's as, I think it's it's more of a benefit than it is a liability. So, any other questions? Okay. I think that's probably enough.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming.